Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. One thing I've learnt in life is it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Boy, if we want to talk to this guy about how he got to where he is, back in 2015, there was a news story I think most of us will remember. Just a week after being diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, Christchurch Boys High School head boy, Jake Bailey, went viral when he delivered his end-of-year speech from a wheelchair. Jake was already undergoing life-saving treatment when he gave that speech. His journey through treatment leaving him questioning how we face and overcome adversity. Jake has studied positive psychology and now gives talks all over the world. He's written what he's learnt into a book, The Comeback Code, and Jake is with me. Thank you so much for being with me, Jake.
Privileged to be here, Paula. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat.
Oh, no, I really appreciate it. And people are going to be very interested. Okay, a couple of quick fire questions. What's top of your bucket list?
Oh, that's a good question. I've got a funny relationship with bucket lists. And by the way, I'm off to a bad start in terms of quick fire questions. As you'll come to find, I think I'm generally sort of painfully verbose and spend far too much time talking, probably because I've ended up doing it for work, I think. But at the top of the bucket list, I guess, as I say, funny relationship with bucket lists. I think coming out the other side of cancer and the treatment and things, and feeling very, very fortunate to have, I guess, the opportunity to go out into, I don't know, I guess tackle life and a new appreciation for that post the cancer. I'm not sure if there's anything in particular which stands out, but I think if anything, I probably feel compelled to just try and take all the opportunities that I can every day. I think instead of sort of a macro bucket list of trying to, tick off big particular goals or have things, I guess, which I need or wish to achieve, I think probably more than anything, it's just about, making the most of each and every day, as mundane and regular and boring as they often can be. It tends to be the stuff which I really appreciate the most, I think.
Good on you. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I think New Zealand would definitely be the answer. And then where within New Zealand, I think, the South Islands have got a big part of my heart. Arrowtown, Queenstown kind of way in particular, given, the mountains and things which I love doing there, skiing, hiking, trail running. Yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to sort of find myself in that neck of the woods, really.
Yeah, good on you. I love it there too. Okay, Jake, as I said in the introduction, it was about 10 years ago that we first heard of you. I'm not sure there's anyone out there that wouldn't remember the story of you giving that end of year speech, and I want to talk a bit more about that. So can you put into words, I feel silly, stupid asking you it, but I mean, can you put into words at your age then of 17, 18, what on earth it would be like to be told that you have one of the most aggressive forms of cancer and have weeks to live?
Yeah, I guess when I look back on that time of the diagnosis and the ensuing treatment, I think, people, and it's probably the question I get asked most often is, how do you react or what is the emotion? How does it feel in that situation? And it's always a kind of a remarkably boring answer, I think, to a really, really good question, which is, I think particularly at that time and stage of life, and because of the stage of life I was at, it didn't particularly feel like anything too much. There certainly wasn't any of the big emotions which you would necessarily expect. I wasn't, angry or scared or sad or afraid or upset or any of these things, which I suppose you would assume would jump to mind. I think for me, if I look back on it, there was a real sense of nothing much. There was a lot of numbness. And I guess the answer as to maybe why that was, I'm not entirely sure, but I think, probably because of the time and stage of life that I was at. Teenage guys aren't necessarily renowned for being aware of or able to comprehend their own mortality at the best of times, right? And so going into the diagnosis, going through my treatment, I don't think there was ever really a time where I thought that I wouldn't make it through, or a time where I ever doubted that I would survive it. And, I have to put a very, very bold caveat to that, which is that wasn't some sort of, relentless positivity or optimism or bravery or courage or anything like that. I think it was genuinely just sort of teenage naivety and probably being a little bit sort of oblivious as to how much of a risk there was to my health. And so, consequently, I think the emotion that it was associated with that time was kind of not any of the things which you might necessarily expect. So, yeah, how did it feel? Like nothing much, in all honesty. But as I say, that wasn't some sort of, bravery or courage on my part. It was probably just a product of the time and stage of life that I was at and kind of where I was as an 18-year-old guy, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, your experience was so extreme, right? You were 18, about to finish high school. It's not a time in life when people sort of think they're going to have to deal with something, as big as you did. And it was a hell of a diagnosis, right? I mean, in your book, I liked you called yourself the, Usain Bolt of dying because it was just kind of that fast.
Yeah, it was. It was a very, very, very unexpected, obviously, but very, very serious diagnosis. But at the end of the day, the prognosis was kind of relatively good throughout. The treatment which is available for my cancer, the chemotherapy sort of, I guess, works quite effectively because of the mechanism by which chemotherapy functions. If it's a fast-growing cancer, if it's quite an aggressive cancer, it tends to respond better to treatment than those slower, less aggressive forms of cancer. And so, yeah, whilst there was, it was an incredibly serious situation, as you say, there was sort of 2 to 3 weeks to live if the cancer was left untreated, and it was very, very, fast moving situation. I was incredibly fortunate to sort of have the access to and the opportunity to go through the treatment, and obviously have been, really, really incredibly fortunate to have made it through that and to have come out the other side.
But you say that cancer changed you. And do you really see that? Do you think that, and you put a slightly positive light on it in your book in some respects as to to the adult that you've become and the journey that you're on and how much you're giving back to other people by talking about your own experience in the studies and lived experience that you've done. So do you think that cancer changed you? Can you explain that to people?
Yeah. It's a funny one, because I think, given the time of life and stage of life, there's so much change and growth and adaptation, which comes between, I guess, that period of life 10 years ago when I was sort of 17, 18 to where I am now, sort of in my late 20s, 27 now. But yeah, I think aside from all of that natural growth and development, I think the cancer probably simply expedited learnings and growth, which I would have undergone anyway. I think that, over the course of our lifetimes, we sort of go through challenge and adversity and suffering and setback. And I think for all of us, that sort of, crafts and shapes who we are as people. Hopefully, I think for many people, it sort of allows us to grow and come away improved by that experience, or come away better people for having learnt these lessons. I think for me, going through the cancer at that time and stage of life probably just, I guess, expedited some of the lessons and learnings which I would have had otherwise. So how did it change me? I think, fundamentally the easiest way to explain it would probably be that I was just a happier person after the cancer than I was beforehand. A more grateful person, someone who probably enjoyed their life more after the cancer afterwards than I had beforehand. And at its core, I guess, for me, I came to realize that I guess that probably was tied to having developed and learnt some lessons around resilience. I don't think I was a particularly resilient person prior to the cancer. I don't necessarily think I'm a particularly resilient person now after the cancer either. But certainly having gone through that experience of adversity, having been forced to learn and take some lessons and skills and tools for getting through tough times, and then applying those to the other adversity and challenges which we all face in life, I think has greatly improved my life since that point onwards. And that's not just about getting through big things in life. That's not just the health challenges or the cancer or whatever it may be. These are things which I'd learned from the cancer, which I was then applying to all of the other regular teenage adversities which I'd been facing 3 or 4 months prior as a teenage guy, like not making sports teams that I'd trialed for, or being left out of things my mates were doing, or not passing exams that I'd needed to get good marks in. I think at its core, probably the biggest shift was that life felt better after the cancer, and probably the biggest reason for that was that I had been forced to learn and develop some resilience through that process.
So you studied positive psychology, and I just wanted to know what that means, because I was thinking there's not negative psychology, is there? Well, you can't study it.
So, so positive psychology. It's a very good question. So I guess for the first 100 or so years of psychology, it operated on something called the deficit model, which you might have heard of before, which is kind of effectively the study of how we can take people from a -10 back to a zero, back to an even keel. How can we fix your anxiety or your depression or these negative experiences which you are going through, which is obviously incredibly important and very much necessary. And then about sort of 40, 50 years ago, someone came along and said, whilst it's important to take people from this -10 to this zero back to a baseline. What about the study of what takes people from a zero to a 10? What is it that actually makes people happy in life? What is it that makes life worth living? What is it that makes life meaningful or fulfilling for people? What is it that, I guess in my situation, what is it that makes people resilient? And so, yeah, positive psychology is effectively just the study of all of those things. The easiest way to think of it is in the study of how we can take people from an even keel, a baseline, a zero, up to a +10. Whereas regular psychology and psychology operating on the deficit model is this study of how we can get people back to that baseline.
Which is what your book very much does. Certainly having read it, you can, get that sense of how you can build on yourself. And we're going to talk a lot about that because that's definitely the advice section that we've got coming up. So just quickly, before we talk more about your book and resilience, you recently went to Antarctica.
In all honesty, it's been 2.5 months since I was there. I guess I was there, today, 2.5 months ago, and I was actually thinking about this only an hour or two ago. I was sort of still trying to distill down what I've learned or taken away from that experience. And even I'd sort of hoped with the passage of time that I would have kind of been able to process the experience. And in all honesty, I'm still not quite sure that I have. Probably the easiest way to sum it up or describe it, and what I've kind of managed to wrap my head around so far, is that I've never felt so small before in a place. And that's something which I very much enjoy. I'm big into being out in the mountains, hiking, and as I say, trail running and skiing as well, because I like being in environments which make me feel small. And Antarctica did that perhaps more than any other environment I've ever been in before. But it also it has this real sense of calm to it. It's tranquility on a scale which I don't think I've ever been able to experience anywhere before. You stand on a beach at the very, very edge of the earth, and you know that aside from the people that you're there with, you genuinely are the only people for sort of 1,000 kilometers in any direction at the very least, and there's something very, very unique about an opportunity to be in a place like that. So yeah, Antarctica was an incredible privilege to experience that environment, and such a special place. I wish that I could sort of find better words to put it into, or to be able to communicate the experience to other people. But as I say, I think that's still a bit of a work in progress, not something which I've been able to achieve quite yet.
Well, everyone I know that's been has just absolutely said the same thing, that sort of vastness of it all and that unique environment that you just genuinely, can't get anywhere else. So that's fantastic. Right, we're going to take a quick break because I want to spend some real time talking about the book, The Comeback Code. I want to talk about some of the advice around resilience. So we'll be back very shortly. Welcome back to Ask Me Anything. My guest today is Jake Bailey, and we are talking about his new book, The Comeback Code. Okay, we're going to get some advice, Jake, because there's a lot of it in the book. Let's talk resilience. I was just remembering a few months ago, I interviewed John Kerwin, and he told me off for using the word resilience. I use it all the time.
What was JK's case for this? Build me his argument.
I said to him, resilience, and bless him, he said, Paula, I love you. And I was like, yeah, friends, and he said, nothing pisses me off more than you using the word resilience. And so his argument was that it's not well defined, and what resilience is to me is not what resilience is to you.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I see where JK's coming at from that. And I know JK a bit as well, and have had the privilege of sort of crossing paths with him and seeing the incredible work that he does up close. I think, when it comes to resilience, I guess the issue which I have around this idea of resilience and the way that it's framed, and undeniably it is a bit of a buzzword, I suppose, these days. It is something which at a societal level, people have really, I guess, grabbed onto. And maybe because of that, as JK says, it's not necessarily clearly defined at a societal level. I think, there's a very clear definition within psychology of how we, how we frame resilience and the skills and tools around resilience. But I think for us individually, then sure, there may be, differences in how we perceive what resilience may be or how it may present itself. I think the other issue is, and potentially what JK is tapping into there as well, is that I think at a societal level, resilience has been sort of misconstrued in the past as the sense of hardening up or toughening up or the stiff upper lip kind of mentality. And I think for me, and certainly working in this space now, that's not how I perceive it and certainly not what I advocate for, right? I think, at the end of the day, resilience is just simply one's ability to overcome and to recover from the inevitable adversity and challenges which we all face in life. The bottom line is we can learn and develop and hone and craft these skills. We know from the research that people are able to, I guess, better learn and develop and adapt themselves to recover from the things which do go wrong in all of our lives. And so whilst I understand that, people may have different perceptions around this, or it may take different shapes and forms for people, some of which may, as I say, not necessarily be all of that healthy. As I said, previously people have just been expected to sort of put up or shut up. I think that it's certainly something which at the end of the day we know is incredibly closely tied to happiness and well-being in life, and I guess because of that, having seen the impact in my own life and the impact on lives around me, I feel passionate about the opportunity to try and better prepare people for the challenges which we will inevitably go through, right? And it's just the reality of life is that things go wrong. We can better prepare ourselves to recover from those. I think that to do so is a common sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I've done a lot on resilience. It's kind of what I speak about the most because it's, what people are interested in, particularly to my sort of female audiences, because I can come at it from a sort of a, that woman's perspective as well. And that, and I completely agree with you that it's something that you can learn and it's something that you can build on. And some of it's from learned experience, right? But often it is just the lens that you look at things through. So I think that we need to talk about the 4S model. Slow down was the first S, and I liked it. So I just wanted to say that I was travelling and I was reading your book, and I had someone I know that had something quite big happen in their lives, and sort of everyone was talking about it, and I said, Jake would just say slow down. We don't have to solve this today, actually I think you're allowed to just break this down into small manageable, actually perhaps just getting up today and knowing that you're loved and and spending a bit of time together is we don't need to talk about it ad nauseum and try and solve this big challenge that you've got ahead. And so I was quoting you on day one. There you go. So talk to us about
I'm privileged. I'm privileged to hear that. Thank you. I guess the idea of slowing down is as you say, to take big problems, challenges, pieces of adversity, and to, I guess, face them on terms which feel manageable. To take them, as you say, a month at a time, a week at a time, a day at a time, whatever it is which feels approachable for you. Because I'm sure for you, certainly for me, and I imagine for all of your listeners as well, that we've all found ourselves in situations in life where things go wrong and your instinctive first response is, I have no idea how I'm possibly going to get through this, right? Have we not all, woken up during tough times in life and thought, I have no idea how I'm going to get through this day. I've got no idea how I'm going to get through this, loss of a loved one, this divorce, this redundancy. I've got no idea how I could possibly see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess the answer is, in those situations, hopefully for all of us, it's been, well, I won't focus on just getting through it. I'll instead focus on getting through to lunchtime today where I can go for a walk, or I'll focus on getting through to the end of the day where I can catch up with a friend and spend some time with them, or I'll focus on just getting through to the weekend when I've got some more breathing room. And certainly the research suggests that when people are able to, I guess, interact with adversity on this different, time frame or time scale, if they have the ability to sort of manipulate that time frame within their own head, then we can really change the way that we experience and feel during those periods of challenge.
Yeah.
If you have the capacity to face things on your own terms, you do a significantly better job getting through it. And
from your perspective as well, I mean, we sort of talked about it earlier, but that sort of the cancer treatment, I mean, in the tests and what was being done to you was just, quite frankly, huge. And if you'd been trying to think what a month's time might look like, or what's going to even happen next week, you sort of explain that in the book as well, as actually just taking it each day as to what you had to do was part of that slowing down for you.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I've no qualms about admitting that if I had have probably zoomed out and looked at the whole thing, which was ahead, if I had have, viewed the challenge as, I don't know, sort of beating the cancer in inverted commas, or getting through the cancer, then I'm not even entirely sure I would have wanted to have tried, right?
Yeah.
It would have seemed incredibly insurmountable. And I think, consequently, if you frame these things as being so big, so massive, so insurmountable, they become that, right? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And on the flip side, if you, as I did in my situation, and my situation is certainly not the be-all and end-all, it's just sort of a teaching example in this context. But in my situation, I was very much focused on getting through that day's chemotherapy, whilst, consciously, deliberately, willfully ignoring the fact that there was still going to be more coming tomorrow and the day after that, and I guess the day after that as well.
Yeah, it's huge. Okay, well, the second one is salvage, and I read that you said, it's one of your favourites, and I get that something positive. It was the one, I wouldn't say I struggled with it, but I had to get my head around this one a bit, because it's kind of, I suppose it's part of that, always look on the bright side of life and that sort of thing. And I don't know, I'm becoming a cynical old woman. I love the humour, don't get me wrong, I use humour a lot, but I just did, there was just part of me, I was like, oh, I'm just getting old and grumpy and cynical. But talk us through what that means for you.
Sure, fair enough.
Yeah.
So salvaging is, as you've touched on there, salvaging is effectively, I guess, your ability to identify silver linings. It's your ability to look for the good, look for the positive during tough times, during adversity, during challenge, during setback. And yeah, I can certainly, from your perspective, I can understand, why that may, and I can see for many people, I guess, why that can be challenging to do. And actually, recounted a conversation recently I had with a student where she said, well, hang on, that's not kind of the right way to face things in life. That's what's called toxic positivity, which was a term which I'd never really come across before. And we sort of talked it through, and she said, toxic positivity, I guess, is this idea of feeling the need or compulsion to always be positive, right? Even in situations which are adverse or challenging, it's I guess the denial of the facts or the situation, and to instead just continue to try and plod on. And I guess my response to her is that when it comes to salvaging, I guess at its core, it is the very opposite of that. Salvaging is based around something which in psychology is known as realistic optimism. And realistic optimism is basically exactly what it says on the tin, right? It's your ability to realistically appraise a situation and to deliberately choose to be optimistic in spite of that. And so, the first part of that's incredibly important. From a psychological perspective, we don't want people to, sort of be in denial about a situation. We don't want to willfully, deliberately delude ourselves about a situation. We have to be realistic about it, which often is to say, actually, this sucks. Like, this is appalling. This is abysmal. I hate this. I feel terrible. I wish I wasn't going through this. But in spite of that, to still, choose to seek out and to look for the good within that situation, to process what comes in through this lens of what about this could be good, or what about this could be a positive? Because I guess the reality of life is that things are not black and white. They're not binary. There is good within the bad, and within the book, I sort of spoken about some of the things which stood out for me when I was in hospital. And again, I don't bring that up because I think my story is particularly special or unique or uncommon, because the reality is it's not. It's a remarkably common story. But for me, it was things like, yes, I feel incredibly sick right now because of this chemotherapy, this treatment. I feel terrible, but once I get through this, I will probably never feel this bad again for the rest of my life, right? And this is probably the worst I'll ever have to feel for the rest of my life. And that's great. That's fantastic. So it's not about, it's not about being in denial about the situation, and hence it's not the sense of toxic positivity. It's also, not mindlessly, I guess, sort of meandering through with head in the clouds, pretending that everything's fine, which hopefully sort of, puts your cynical mind to rest. It's about the ability to appraise the situation, but to still choose to try and, I guess, identify the good which there may be within it. And I guess at the end of the day, the bottom line is that certainly the research suggests that people who have the capacity to do this are the ones who tend to be able to weather the tough times the most effectively.
And humour is so important, and you touch on that. And I was, as you were saying that, as I was reading it, and you talked about the nursing staff and things, and I was just remembering when I was in Parliament and kind of in the real thick of it, and very hard job, and child, youth, and family, and and I've always had a sense of humour, and I just remember. One of my colleagues just saying to me, no one's going to take you seriously and you're incredibly irritating. And he actually really meant it,
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like, I don't really care if you find me irritating. But it's like, don't think my humour demeans my intellect or my ability to assess a situation. It just means that we can also, and you sort of say that with those nursing staff, it's kind of like if you didn't have a laugh and a bit of a dark humour, you'd be crying all day.
Yeah. And look, there are many times we find ourselves in those, laugh or cry situations in life. And whilst there's sort of nothing wrong with the latter, I suspect that, and it would be, I don't have the data to back it up, but my suspicion would be that generally if you can do more of the former rather than the latter, you probably get through life in a far better way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think humour is important. And as you say, humour, I guess at its core is the capacity to salvage. It's the ability to take something good, in this case a bit of levity, from the bad, which in this case, the adversity and suffering.
All right, you're going to run me through Streamline, and that's sort of containing those everyday anxieties and fears. So explain Streamline to people that are listening. Yeah,
sure. So I guess streamlining, as you say, is your capacity effectively to manage and control your anxieties and worries, particularly during periods of adversity and challenge. And I guess as humans, and I'm sure, this is something which I think we've all experienced. Again, I sense, based upon talking to people, this is a relatively universal experience. But during times of adversity, when things are going wrong, there's a real tendency often to pick up kind of everything, right? And during our lowest points, it feels like everything is going wrong or everything is hard. And it's often quite easy to catastrophize and to continue to take on more and more suffering and adversity and challenge during those lowest points. And I guess the issue with that is that, during those tough times, that is when our resources are at the most diminished already, right? When we have our lowest capacity to manage and to navigate these anxieties and worries and concerns, the last thing we need to be doing is picking up more and more of them. So we tend to find that people who get through tough times the best, the ones who have the capacity to, most effectively put their effort and attention and resources towards things which actually matter during tough times. A good friend of mine, Dr. Lucy Hone, who's, an internationally, globally renowned expert in this field and someone who I imagine many of your listeners will be familiar with, the way that she frames this is around the sense of, is what I'm doing helping or harming? Is what I'm doing helping or harming? And I guess the reality is that often during tough times, during those lowest points, it's very easy to pick up and to tackle those worries and anxieties and concerns, which may be peripherally or tangentially related to what is going wrong, when really what we should be doing is dedicating all of our attention and effort towards focusing on those things which matter the most. So it's about streamlining by putting our attention towards those things which matter, controlling those other anxieties and worries and concerns.
I mean, what you've been doing as far as your public speaking, you talk about being in a juvenile facility, whom you're speaking to is something I think that's really genuine in how it's giving back. And I mean, I was reading that it's over 100,000 people now that you've probably been in front of, and this book is just going to absolutely go out there and extend that obviously to so many other people. It's written for everyone. I loved it. I got lots out of it. But the people who share their stories in the book are generally, are younger. And I just think it's really going to resonate with younger people as well, and that this is something that we should be gifting our young people so that we can help them know that those voices that are sometimes, in the head and the overthinking and all the rest of it that goes on when we're a bit younger is actually something that we can overcome and we can build on. So What would your message be to younger people if you could give them that sort of, it's going to be okay?
Whenever I try and, I guess, answer that question or ask myself, what do I most want to give young people, or what would I most want to leave young people with? And I suppose it's a question which I relatively frequently find myself wondering, because as you say, I've been, really privileged to have worked with and presented to over 100,000 young people now over the past nearly 10 years. I think when I try and answer that question, you've got to start it from the position of remembering, and I guess in my case, where I was 10 years ago, right? And I think that in doing so, you hopefully try and err away from cliche and from sounding like my parents did, talking to me. It doesn't help that, I guess in hindsight and 10 years later, I've come to realize that everything which they said was right, which is one of those superpowers that parents tend to hold. But I guess, yeah, when I talk to young people, what I try and explain to them is something which I did hear many times when I was younger, which is don't worry so much about the things which you find yourself preoccupied with at this age and stage of life, given that so many of them will not come to matter in a year's time or 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And as I talk to them about, I wish that I could sort of feed them examples of the things which, which weighed so heavily on me, which kept me up when I was 16 years old. But I can no longer do it because none of them continue to impact or sort of have any effect on my life now, slightly over 10 years later. It's the sort of things which I give generic examples of before, like, the sports teams I didn't make, or the fallout which I had with mates, or the exams and assignment which I failed. I couldn't give you any specific examples of any of those because they've long since fallen out of my head, right? But I do recall many sort of sleepless nights laying awake and worrying about these things. And I guess at the end of the day, I'm incredibly skeptical of anyone who tells you that high school is the best years of your life, because I suspect that it's probably a reflection of the years they've had since high school than the years they had during high school. But the bottom line is that your time in high school is a remarkably unique and special time of life. And I think that there is the capacity or the risk of squandering and failing to fully enjoy and utilize that time of life if you do not sort of manage and control those worries.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a special time of life, and there's definitely the capacity to miss that if you're too busy being preoccupied with things which won't matter in 10 years time. But as I say, this is something which I was told many times at that time and stage of life as well. I'm not sure if it's something which I particularly took on board, and so it would be relatively hypocritical of me to hope or expect any other young people to believe it coming from me, but it is still the advice which I give.
Don't worry, I was a teenager in the 80s, and I just say to people, oh my God, we were so beautifully angst-ridden. All the music from that time is, it's just so over the top. The clothing, the hair, we just did this morose kind of angst-ridden. That was incredibly. I look back at it and I just can't stop laughing. Okay, the final S, because we have to say stand alongside, and I love this. You sort of say pick your team, and I use that as well. Those people that are going to back you when you need it, and those people that are alongside of you, and those genuine. Family and friendships that mean so much, but you got to accept help sometimes, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I've been at pains to stress, sort of, I guess, throughout this, that all of this is very much evidence and research based, which I think is important to give people confidence to I guess believe in the work, and to understand that there is more to it than just me sort of hypothesizing or postulating or talking about things which I think are really cool and great. And there's plenty of evidence and research, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of the time the evidence and research, instead of making it feel, I guess believable, it takes it away from feeling relatable, right? It makes it feel quite clinical. It makes it feel quite disconnected from reality. Anyway, I guess the bottom line is that, as I say, whilst all of it's evidence and research based, this point in particular is the one which has the greatest, I suppose, body and weight of evidence behind it. We effectively see that people who go through adversity and challenge in life without the support of someone by their side, without the sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves, without a feeling that there is a place where they are safe or that they can retreat to, they basically do they do it incredibly tough. They really do struggle to get through life's ups and downs. And as I say, perhaps more than any of the other three S's, this is the one which generally tends to predict how well people get through life, is basically how many people they've got to lean on during those tough times. And so, yeah, certainly there's a big case to be made for doing so, but probably potentially even more important than that, I think it's important for us to be mindful that when times are good, when things are going well, we need to be actively, consciously, deliberately investing time and effort and energy into forming and building those relationships, into joining that social sports team, making those friends, having conversations with loved ones in our life, so that when things do go wrong, we know that we have people by our side that we can rely on or we can turn to.
Yeah.
And yeah, really, that is, I guess, kind of relatively intuitive for people, but something which I think is easy to neglect a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, the way I kind of put it is, it's okay to need someone, and you need to be someone sometimes. And I think that advice out there as well is, if someone is going through something quite big, then, if you love them, and even if maybe you don't love them, but someone needs someone, then you can be that person, which is really important to reach out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it goes into a whole range of conversations, I suppose, around how we structure our communities and sort of how we allow people the opportunities to forge and develop a sense of belonging within communities. It goes to, I guess this conversation around what is the heart of a community, and if we look at where we are now, I suppose, compared to maybe where we were 40 years ago with organised religion, or with sports clubs and strong sporting cultures, it goes towards the hollowing out of a lot of our regional centres and smaller towns. It goes towards the disconnection which we're increasingly facing at a societal level, even within major centres. There's a lot more to it, and a lot which can be discussed and unpacked. But at an individual level, certainly it's incredibly important for us to be conscious and mindful of forging and creating places where we know that people have our back, pretty much.
So where's life at for you now? You've done the book, which is amazing. Yeah. So it's going out there and talking to people a bit about that. And what's going on in your life?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure. In all honesty, I'll be completely forthright and say that for me it's been an amazing sort of past 10 years. I've been incredibly privileged and fortunate to have had the opportunity to do this work, and it's been incredibly fulfilling. I guess it's very much my passion. I feel incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to have done it. But I think that potentially for me the book marks the start of the end of this chapter, I suspect. Maybe the beginning of the end. And that's just simply because I feel like I've effectively kind of done what I've wanted to do in this space. I feel like I've really sort of accomplished all that I wanted to do in this area, and I'm sort of ready for the next challenge. For me, I've been, as I say, incredibly fortunate to have had this opportunity, and I guess for the cancer to have led me into this pathway now. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone wants to continue to be defined by anything which they did when they were 18 years old. And so for me, I think I'm ready for the next challenge. I'm ready for the next summit, I suppose, to reach, because for me I feel like I've sort of hit the summit in this space, and I've been really fortunate to have had the opportunity to do so. But 27 now, I'm ready for the next challenge, the next chapter, and I don't know what that is yet. I'm not entirely clear what that will be, but I'm looking forward to finding out and sort of sinking my teeth into something new. And the bottom line is, the reality is, this work, this story, and this experience which I've had will forever remain a really integral part of who I am. I don't see myself stopping the speaking work or moving out of this resilient space anytime soon, but maybe just continuing to remain in this work in a different sort of capacity to the one which I've been in over the past 10 years, as I start onto something new and take on some new challenges, really.
Well, I think that's really exciting, and I'm 56 and I'm still figuring it out, so Just keep going. and here's hope that
let me know when you find out the answer,
okay.
because I've been looking for it.
No, you'll do something else for the next 10 years, and then you'll change, hopefully, and do something. It's a beautiful life, and there's heaps of opportunity out there, I reckon. And I really admire people that know exactly what they're going to do and, you know, where they're going to be in 10 years' time. But that's just not me at all. And sometimes just being open to opportunities means that even better things come along. You know, because you're actually open and you just don't quite know where they're going to come. So I think it sounds really exciting. Okay, Jake, the podcast is called Ask Me Anything. I've done all the asking. So if you want to, you can have a opportunity to ask me something.
Well, I guess for me, you know, obviously my work is around resilience, and I've got a real, you know, at a personal level, I suppose I have a real fascination with what it is that allows people to get through the adversity and challenge and setback which they've faced over the course of their own life. And so, you know, I don't want you to have to dredge up any particular, you know, sort of suffering or trauma which you've been through, but I'm really interested to know sort of what it is that has allowed you to get through the toughest times in your life, or the most significant adversity and challenge which you have faced. What it is, what skills or tools you have drawn on in those times to get through.
I think some of it is like you kind of say in the book, but I probably say it just slightly differently, is you know, that learned experience, you know, so, you know, the first time that this, you know, the boyfriend breaks up with you, you just think your whole world's over and you're going to die. And, you know, like nothing can be worse than this. And the drama, as I say, of the 80s, my God, it was fantastic. But then as you go on, you realise that actually you have got resilience and you are okay. And the next time it happens, you just go, well, actually, this is a bit of a shit time right now, but I'll be all right in a few days and I'll get back on. And then I've had big stuff like, you know, literally losing a brother and a best friend within a couple of months of each other and really freak accidents and things. But I suppose when I needed my resilience the most was when I was in politics and in Parliament, and that sort of almost daily. You know, so whether it was kind of what was happening around you, whether it was the expectation of the public, whether or not it's just, you know, and so I don't know, but I positive affirmations, you know, like I'd literally write things on my mirror on lipstick. So when I got up in the morning, it's the first thing I saw. I really trained myself, and I decided I did have choices. You know, like I could actually really dwell on the negative, or I could dwell on the more positive. And so I trained myself to do that and to stop myself when it was getting a bit too negative.
Yeah, I think that it's always really fascinating to see how, I guess at both a micro and a macro level, what it is that allows people to get through life's challenges. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Hey, Jake, thank you for the book and for sharing your story. And everyone out there, you do need to go and read it, because we've had a great yarn today, but there is so much more in there. There's other people's stories that you bring in that you know that give us real life examples. And I just think it's really important that people go. So you can find The Comeback Code in bookstores now. Go and get it. And that's it for another episode of Ask Me Anything. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, I was going to say make sure you check out some of our past guests, but Jake mentioned Dr. Lucy Hone, and I was lucky enough to interview her, and I've met her a few times. So she's, like you said, a woman that I deeply, deeply admire. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to Dr. Lucy, Hone, if you're looking it up. We'll be back next Sunday. Really looking forward to it. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.